Hello and welcome to the Rask Network. What you're about to hear and see is limited to general financial information only. Please be sure to speak to your financial planner or refer to our financial services guide available at rask.com.au/FSG before acting on the information.
Welcome to the Australian Retirement Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, James O'Reilly from Northeast Wealth.
Hey, mate.
Welcome, James.
Thank you.
Such an exciting time and looking forward to tackling the big problems and opportunities that come with retirement with you. So I think the best place to start is kind of a bit of an intro on why we're launching this, along with Rask, and a bit of a background on yourself too would be fantastic.
Yeah, would love to. Thanks, everyone. So first and foremost, we've identified, of course, and if you're here, you've probably identified it too, that retirement's pretty tricky. There's a lot to it.
Very different for everyone.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and one of the, of course, with retirement, there's a countless amount of products. There's so much strategy. There's so much legislation around tax, around age pension, around what you can do there, and on top of that, that overlays with your own personal preferences and what you want your retirement to look like, and the things you want to achieve or the things that you want to avoid, and that makes it such a fertile place for advice. And so the aim of this podcast, of course, is that we can help as many people as possible to get a lot of clarity around their retirement, to be able to plan with more clarity, to perhaps do some of those things earlier, because, of course, how many times have we had people come to us and say, we should have done this a decade ago, and you're thinking, you
have a financial plan tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. You should have done this a decade ago. So, hopefully there are some people listening today and also in the future that where this does instill some confidence and spur on those first important steps to start planning for your retirement and ultimately have a better time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we know that financial literacy in Australia is quite low. It's improving a lot. Things like podcasts, YouTube, the amount of content that's becoming available, but it's still incredibly challenging to find retirement-focused content. I think it's similar in the financial advice and financial services industry. Everything's kind of set up for people who are saving money, putting it away, investing everyone's investing for the long term, but looking to grow their capital. But we know, and both of us through our experience in advice, is that it becomes more about you have to both protect and grow your capital at the same time. And once you've got that finite pool, everything is a lot more emotional and kind of and more. Everything is more linked to what's happening with your money on a daily basis. It can be incredibly uncomfortable. We've spent. I started in 2005 in the industry, so that's 19 years at the time of recording. And I'll be honest and upfront and say, like every advisor, we did we were generalists for a long period of time. But over time, we found, as you have, where our experience and skill was able to add the most value, and that naturally led us to retirement, to the point that that's literally all we deal with now. Be good to understand where you were before Northeast Wealth.
Yeah, love to. So both of my parents were financial advisors.
Really?
Which is how I got in here. I don't
think you see that very often.
Yeah, it gets worse. I've got 5 sisters, no brothers, so that's pretty bad as it is. But there was one point where, out of my parents plus 5 sisters and myself, so that's 8 of us, I think maybe 6 of us were practicing advisors, 5 or 6.
So you're doing a bit for the lack of financial advice in the country?
Yeah, that's right. We're doing everything that we can.
Yeah.
You couldn't question our effort. But in particular, my interest for advice came really younger than, I put it to you, pretty much any other advisor. And I say that because my parents were advisors. My parents separated when I was maybe 16, 17.
Yeah.
And my dad carried on the business. But my dad could not type ever to save himself. He was the worst typist you've ever seen.
Which is most advisors from that ilk, I'd say, not just him.
Yeah, certainly wasn't a strength of his. And so I ended up writing plans while I was still at high school.
16.
That's right. Now, I wasn't writing many, admittedly, but he'd be saying, I need this typed out. Can you help me with how to do it?
Compliant plans.
Yeah. And so from a really early age, I was lucky enough to get exposed to it and then be thinking a little bit more about, I'm like, if you hang on, wait a moment, you can do this and you can do this strategy. And I always enjoyed the maths element of it too. So at that point, it was really strategic, and I enjoyed the how to win in terms of financial advice and how to get a better outcome. That was cool. And then I went out on worked in a couple of smaller businesses. Worked at the Commonwealth Bank, which was an interesting experience.
We had no crossover.
2011 to 2014.
Well after. Yeah.
Yep.
I was out of there pretty quickly.
Yeah, okay. Oh, you were, because when I got there, they were talking about all these horrible problems that had taken place before I got there. That must have been you. Yeah. No, I was there for a couple of years and learned a lot. Learned some, the things, like some really great things about advice. Learned some
very
horrible things about
concerning
advice.
things about advice.
You shouldn't rank people from best to worst in terms of revenue if you or advisors if you want them to do the right things. That's
show me the incentive, I'll show you the action. That's probably one of the big takeaways.
Yeah, that should have been an obvious thing in 2010, 11. But I think my time there in particular as an advisor really helped me to realize and love the relationships element of it. One thing I was really grateful for, and you would have experienced this too at a bank, is the volume. You're lucky enough to sit with a lot of people and have a lot of really meaningful conversations with people. And so I went from being in advice because of the strategy and the maths and the winning type feeling to being in advice because there's people here that you can really meaningfully help and you can see that improvement. So,
and you're a director and you own Northeast Wealth?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So out on our own, and then from my end, really, it's been around building a business that I guess much like yourself is in line with your values and serves people the way that you think advice should serve people, and is really client centric. So
it's interesting. We have a bit of a crossover there. That I spent my first 18 months at the Commonwealth Bank. This is during the period that eventually was part of the Royal Commission.
So it was you.
It was 05, 06. I literally lasted 18 months in the industry, and it taught you one part about delivering client advice, but then it taught you what bad advice was and how damaging bad advice could be. And it was literally product driven. Just distribution driven and sales target driven. And that's why I ultimately left within about 18 months and joined what was the first fee-for-service independent financial advice business at the time.
Wow. Cool.
It had many names, but Donnelly, I think it was Donnelly Money Management at the time. Probably similar in many ways to what Owen and Rask are doing these days, which it was very much based on helping DIY investors and increasing financial literacy by running a newsletter. And people naturally sought out advice from people who were willing to share that information. But it gave me a good grounding in, what goes wrong in financial advice, but also the value you can add on those few occasions.
Yeah.
Left pretty quickly and learned a much different story, probably more similar to yourself, which is how do you think more holistically? How do you move away from product? And that most people our mission in retirement, I think will be the same, but it's probably a good perspective that you got two different types of advisors, is to have most of our clients or all of our clients not worry about money in retirement. I see too many people that are fixated on what dividend they're going to get, what income they're getting. But we want money to be the last thing and, pay us a reasonable amount to take care of that and use the flexibility you get to essentially enjoy your life and find your passion, because retirement is something like, it's usually around 30 years for most people. So
you've done
not
well.
A short period of time.
Yeah.
Even longer now.
Yeah, I love hearing you say that. I couldn't agree more. From our end, we have a really similar focus in that we want people to be able to live life on their terms, and that ultimately comes from having the money to be able to do that, but then also getting really clear on what you actually want. And I think we could both speak for hours about the idea that often when you sit down with someone who is approaching retirement, whether they're proactively doing it at 50 or if they're reactively doing it at 64, they don't necessarily have a good feel for what they actually want. You're still full speed ahead on that hamster wheel, working really hard and thinking, in 18 months I might quit or whenever it would be. Let's just air brakes for a moment. What are you actually going to do?
What's my target?
What are you going to do after that?
Well, most people just get a statement from their I talk about this all the time. You retire, you get a statement. You don't get a gold watch anymore like you used to, because no one stays long enough for their employer to get a gold watch. You get a statement and then it's like, good luck. There's no referral to financial advice. Your super fund can't help with a lot of things, very specific, and you're kind of left to your own devices. So it'd be probably worth giving context to who we think or who the audience is for this podcast. I think a lot of people think retirement, I got to be in my 70s to listen to this, but I know you work with clients much younger than that.
Yeah. Retirement is we're working with members a lot of members in their 40s and 50s, for example, and retirement is a conversation that starts, as far as I'm concerned, in your 40s. If you want to retire crazy early, then potentially earlier.
And retirement just doesn't have to be, hanging up your boots and money off super. I know financial independence, retire early is pretty popular, but it's just this idea of generating a passive income that gives you flexibility.
Correct. Yeah. From our end, there the compounding effect of making good decisions early is, I mean, that's why we're in financial advice, right? And so even if you are in your early to mid 40s, if you're here listening to this podcast, then chances are you probably have an interest in retirement. You're starting to think about the things that you might need to do. So it's never too early to start thinking about that stuff and bringing it forward and practically thinking about what you can do to boost your wealth in retirement, because ultimately it's going to mean either retiring earlier or rather, to rephrase, having life on your own terms earlier, or it's going to mean being able to do more than you thought you were going to at that time, and they're both pretty cool outcomes.
And you cover both the investment and strategy side, so contributions, tax, as well as investing?
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, you're doing the same, of course, right?
Yeah, exactly. We probably more tilted towards those more closer to retirement, so more like our average client would be between 55 and 75, so say 65. But the ones that are starting to really seriously think about transitioning, and those last few years of really strong savings capacity, we've always been an investment grounded group. So understanding that investing in retirement is completely different to investing when you continue to contribute 11.5%, 12% of your income every year. So a big part of ours is investment driven, but we're also everything structure and strategy to do with super. So SMSFs, super funds, platforms, contributions. I think we talk about on the other podcast that we end up cancelling more insurance that we ever take out.
Yep.
That's probably a good sign you're in retirement.
Yes.
And pretty much every meeting we have is, do I still need this? And in a lot of cases it is, no, you don't. But again, this is only general advice. It'd be good to understand, even from the perspective, not for those just seeking advice, but the financial advice process is probably something people can follow when they're going through the motions themselves. So it'd be good to understand how you engage with new people when they reach out.
We I think hopefully with every financial advisor that you should go and see.
The process should be the same?
Yeah, well, in many respects, they should have a really clear understanding of your finances and broadly your finances, not just what's your super fund and let's switch that, but how does that contextually play into your overall situation?
Yeah.
Going beyond that, the immediate, tell me about your overall asset base and where are the quick wins to improve your situation and put you in a better spot. We have a really heavy focus around saying, well, what does your best life look like? So let's get some structure around the idea that if we're, for example, 5 years into the future, tell me about what your best life at that point would look like. What would you be doing?
Stick to a strategy when
That's
you have
right.
a real goal in mind.
Yeah, 100%. And also this incidentally, because I think this might be valuable for people, especially if you're in your 40s or 50s and think about retirement, still a long way away. I'm referred back to reminded of a study that was completed quite a few years ago, and the findings of the study were pretty obvious, which is that the relationship that you have with your future self is that of a third party.
Yeah.
And to explain that, let's consider, for example, I say, hey, tonight we are going out, we're going to have 15 beers, the wildest night ever. You are naturally going to think about tomorrow. You're going to think about whether or not you can survive. Like, is that practical?
Yeah.
You look, you're a pretty disciplined bloke. I'd like to think that you'd probably say no to that one. But if you had all of Friday free, then you might say yes, right?
Yeah.
However, if I said to you, we're going to do that in 5 years' time, on this date, 15 beers, you're much more likely to say yes. It's the same pain. It's still you. You're still going to go through none of that changes. But because it's so far into the future, you're no longer as emotionally connected to that pain.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true of your goals. If you've got goals, for example, I want to retire at, let's say, 60 and you're 48, for instance, the truth is that the vast majority of people are going to have a pretty low emotional connection to that goal, to the point where you're probably not really, like, that goal's not really influencing your decisions day to day.
You're not really willing to sacrifice
at all. That's right.
If it's so far ahead.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so a big part of what we do is saying, well, where do you want to be? And then building out that roadmap to say, well, if you want that life in 5 years' time, then we need to start doing these things now. We need to have practical year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, so that we can stand there at the end and say, we're exactly what you described as being like my best life. We're exactly there right now, either at that point or earlier.
I find a lot of people need coaching to work that out. Like, most people come in and they expect us to tell them how much they're going to spend in retirement, or how much they need. And it'd be nice if they did. But a lot of it requires coaching and questioning and constant kind of analysis. And, things like forward-looking budgets, they don't I don't know about you, but they don't tend to help because it's the same problem. Even if it's tomorrow, it's still tomorrow. So you can always spend it today.
Yes.
But there is so much guidance and getting to know each person's family situation. And I mean, we did it in the book that we released recently as well. Tried to have case studies that were relevant to different people, and then find out what drives them. There's incredibly important things like if you're going to start investing and putting your capital work, how much money do you need to sit in your own bank account to feel comfortable at night? Otherwise, everything goes out the window when things get difficult.
And I think this speaks to the complexity of advice, right? And particularly for retirement planning. It's a big beast. It's tricky to get right.
It's not off the shelf. It's not one stop. And then we'd follow probably a similar process, which is learn as much as we possibly can, help identify those goals, and then in most cases, you're trying to do, like you would in any industry, you're trying to do a diagnostic report. We're just literally doing it on every aspect of your financial situation. Whereas if you go to a doctor or a lawyer, you're getting advice on one area. So we try and include everything in there, and then set up what's generally a strategy for the next 15, 20, 30 years. I like to pull out a case study of sorts, which I think we always get a lot of questions, and I'm sure you do as well, about upfront advice. Can I just execute it myself? The quantitative versus the qualitative parts of financial advice. And I refer to Mary, so anonymous name, but we're calling her Mary. And this is like one of the I think the better ways to explain the value of financial advice is Mary retired in 99. We all expect retirement as you retire and you get this, you just money will come in and everything will be fine. But she's had changes from superannuation, social security, investment, and all parts of her life. So the age that she could access super increased from 60 to 65. Superannuation contribution limits were cut, tax concessions were changed, pension concessions were changed, age pension access was adjusted. She had the dot-com, she had September 11, she had global financial crisis, she had Brexit, she had pandemic, and she had portfolio fell more than 10% 9 times and more than 25% twice.
Did Mary survive this period?
Mary came out completely fine. That's the conclusion of this story with good advice. But she also, that's just the investment part of her situation. And then she had one grandchild now. When she retired, she's now got 4 grandchildren. She took up tennis in her 60s after not playing for 40 years.
One Wimbledon.
She catches up weekly, plays bridge, and she unfortunately lost her partner. She's moved house 3 times, considering entering aged care, and has one child that's divorced. So this isn't actually that rare situation.
What you've described is just a normal, like there's a lot of normality to that retirement.
And then you have questions about where can financial advice add value? And you can see a lot of it is behavioral, but how do you have someone that you can call on and have the options of how to act in each of these situations? Yeah,
touche. Well played. Good case study.
We've actually put that in our statement of advice as to a bit of a guidance on there. I think maybe an interesting one would be, what are the either big problems or the most common questions you get from a client when they come in? And I'm sure a lot of those, and naturally we're going to keep asking for people to submit questions for us to answer on this podcast. I think that the only way we'll be a truly beneficial resource if we get questions from the audience that, make sure we're out there with the zeitgeist or what people are really worried about. So what would be the biggest question you receive?
When?
Yeah.
When can I retire? Yeah. Which, as for the reasons that we've just covered, that's not an easy question to answer. It's really going to depend on a whole heap of things. It's going to depend on your lifestyle and what you want and your financial situation, and maybe how dependent you can be on age pension, if at all, or any other entitlements. But rest assured, it is a question. As we go through this podcast, I think we're going to dial into this a little bit and try to build some framework for you to be able to understand. Okay, well, when could I practically do it, and what are some rules of thumb to help?
Yeah, it'd be the same. It's either how much do I need, which you're actually saying a lot of the time, and a lot of clients, you can actually have the benefit or the ability to say, well, you can retire now, and to see people when you get to tell them that, like, there's tears sometimes, there's a new stress comes that they might have all this flexibility. So either it's when or it's how much. And then the big one, which we'll cover in detail, is how much do you actually need in retirement? Because there's no strict measure. It depends completely on your individual situation, and how much you need ultimately depends when you can retire at the same time. We've got a bit of an outline of some of the next 10 episodes we'll be recording or releasing. Do you want to go through a couple of those?
Yeah, I'd love to. We're going to be rolling out, next we'll be talking about how to start planning for retirement, how to build wealth before you retire, and really dialing into those different age groups. If you're in your 40s, if you're in your 50s, if you're in your 60s, then what are the things that you should be focused on? The
really foundational advice or opportunities for almost free kicks and no-brainers that most people can execute.
Yeah, spot on. Traps and also risks to avoid before retirement. There's a huge amount of opportunity that exists if you are retiring in terms of what you can do with your finances, but there's also, you would have had the experience heaps of times, mate, where someone will come in and say, oh, okay, well, here's my financial situation. You say, oh my Lord, how did you get here? How did you get here? Yeah, and it can be hard to untangle. If you want to retire early, you might be someone who says, I want to be ideally, have it all on my own terms by 50 or 55 or something along those lines. Well, what do you have to do? Because your retirement's going to look different. You're going to have less reliance on some things and you're going to have a lot more reliance on others. Transitioning to retirement, let's have a checklist around what that looks like. Estate planning. If you haven't sorted that out before your retirement, then with respect, you've probably got some problems that need to get done earlier than that. So what do you need to do there? Supporting kids and community, designing perfect retirement. And then also, I agree with you, let's have as much Q&A as we can here. So if you're listening to this, you might have your own situation. Feel free to add some detail and some color to it. We'd, the better, the more we have, the better.
Anonymous names. We like the funny names because we can only do general advice. So be specific on situations, but not on who you are.
Correct. Yeah. We will reward high quality anonymous names. The funnier, the better.
We're handing out my book again.
Yeah.
Free book.
Correct. You'll get more of our time if you can have some humor to your anonymity.
Yeah, I think the key here is that we're going to do 10 pretty foundational podcasts that cover some of the biggest areas and the advice areas, and then as it moves on, we'll start to delve into things like investments. How do you invest in retirement? Should it be different? Where are the opportunities? And bring some other guests in during that period as well, and just rounding it out because hopefully your retirement is like 20% investing and 80% fun or even less. Most of my client meetings these days, for clients that have been
just having
10
fun.
or 15 years, they're literally, we met someone before and I think he has a highly complex situation, but over an hour and a half, an hour and 25 was spent talking about his family and his children rather than about finances. We got about 5 minutes to go into investment in his financial situation. I think one of the big aims of this is to have actionable outcomes for everyone. So these episodes will be relatively short, concise. Hopefully we don't blabber too much. But if there's one thing people can take away from this first episode, one thing they should do at home to get started, what would you suggest?
Press play on the next episode. Yeah, truly, I think this is going to be really valuable, and I really feel if you're here, it's because you've got a real interest in retirement planning. You want to learn more about it. Where we've really put a lot of care into this, and I think we're going to deliver something that's really cool. So, hopefully you have the same experience. What about for you, mate?
I'd say just go out and find all the statements that you have for anything to do with your investments. Put them together, and I think maybe one of our episodes will be walking through what to look for in a super fund statement or in a rollover or a pension statement. I think it'd be an interesting. I'm very what's the word? I'm an implementer, so I like to get things done. But thanks for listening and thanks for joining us, James.
Good fun. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.